China and the U.S. are at each other's throats trade-wise. Yesterday, reporters asked President Trump if the United States and China could enter a prolonged trade war, and his answer was, "Well, you're in one now, so you best start believing in trade war stories because you're in one." It's
Pirates of the Caribbean
a little
reference.
Pirates of the Caribbean reference there. So this trade war, in my opinion, has the potential to change global markets forever. I really don't think that's an overstatement. We're going to get into the possible ramifications here, and it's already changing things drastically. So why is this happening? What is happening? And of course, what should the United States do about it? That's where we are here in the U.S. What should we do about it? Find out in this episode of Filibusted Live. All right. So we all know that the United States and China went into a tariff frenzy earlier this year. So that back in April, of course, Trump slapped reciprocal tariffs on countries that have tariffs on us. Just a reminder for everybody. I know a lot of people, especially in the non-conservative world, think that Trump was just kind of trying to cause chaos for no reason. But almost every country has had tariffs against the U.S., and the U.S. had very little tariffs against very little tariffs against them. So most of what Trump was doing was reciprocal tariffs, which we can get into the debating of the tariffs and their efficacy and all that kinds of stuff. And, put the comments below if you love them, hate them, whatever. But since then, we have had some success as far as new trade deals goes. A lot of countries have been negotiating new trade deals, and most of those reciprocal tariffs have been brought down, where the tariffs have been brought down a lot more for the countries going towards us, and the United States in return has pulled them down a little bit, going back the other direction and cut new trade deals and promises of future investment in the United States, all that kind of stuff, yada yada. But we're not talking about other countries. We're talking about China today. And is it possible that something like this is going to actually happen for China? Because right now, so what happened earlier this year is we went into a drastic trade war with China that scared the heck out of global markets. At its height, the United States had 145% tariffs on China, and China had 125% on the United States, which is just bonkers. Just, wrap your brain around that. And that did not last for very long, though. Very quickly, the U.S. and China negotiated a 3-month pause. This was a temporary pause, and it lasted through the summer. And then, of course, that pause got renegotiated and then extended again in August. So the same pause is still just a rehash of the same 3-month pause. And so that is set to expire on November 10th. So we paused the crazy high tariffs. So where are we today? Well, the temporary pause brought the tariffs down to the United States has approximately 57% tariffs on China. So still pretty high, almost 60% tariffs on China. And China's is about half of that. China has about 32% on the United States. And this varies wildly depending on the goods. So those are just approximate numbers because depending on what good you're looking at, the tariffs are like up higher or lower. But those are the estimates that I was found. About close to 60% on China, close to 32% on the United States. Like I said, the deadline is approaching. November 10th is when they're supposed to pop back up. And without a new trade deal, those tariffs are going to skyrocket. And Trump and Xi Jinping are supposed to be meeting later this month. I believe it's scheduled. The articles I saw said they're meeting in South Korea later this month before that November 10th deadline. And in a little bit here, I want to talk about China, what I think China is doing and what their biggest bargaining chip is. They have a couple bargaining chips and things they're trying to do before the meeting to try to put themselves in a better position, I think, for a negotiation maybe, or just for an all-out trade war. We'll see. And they've kind of been secretly doing some things since August that I want to talk about. But before we get into all that, what are y'all's initial assessments about this trade war that we're going into, or Trump saying that we're already in a trade war? What are your thoughts about the situation?
I think we're absolutely in a trade war, and you can see that based off of everything that's happened this year. Sorry to cut you off, Ryan. But I mean, it's crazy how it took this for the United States to start recognizing that we have a severe problem. At least, I say that. I know a lot of people already recognized it, but at least for the public to recognize we have a severe problem with the rare earth mineral situation, and China's grasp on this sector of the global industry and economy and markets, and even a tight, it's almost like a noose around America's neck, you know, to an extent. Now we're going to get into some of that today, obviously, and see if that's really true or not. But it is a problem, and it's something that I think that Trump is trying to fix, and it's something that former presidents of the United States should have already been fixing. And I wish maybe Trump had done more during his first term to address it. And obviously he had a lot of other things on his plate. But yeah, that's where I stand, is that it's a severe problem that should have already been addressed. And at the moment, we're trying to dig ourselves out of a hole.
Yeah, I would even say the U.S. was critical during the Bush administration to pushing China to the top of the world when it comes to being in a supply situation like this. And all the actions that we have taken leading up to this point have continued down that path and giving them favored trade status, and us thinking that they're going to change their human rights violations if we let them in the World Trade Organization and let them become a favored trading partner. But that's all was absurd, and we all knew that on the face of it. And so, like Troy said, it's just the chicken's coming home to roost, so to speak. Like, it's like, okay, now we really see the situation that we are in, and there are actually not only supply chain issues where you're not going to get the cool phone, you might not get the cool phone or the cool whatever that you want. It's actually national security issues that this has become. And so this needs to be addressed right now, and we need to take whatever actions are necessary in order to do that. But the problem I see is that, I think the U.S. and the world has the upper hand against China, especially if we're coming together. The problem is China is very willing to let their people suffer. And so that is something that the U.S. would not do, but that is something that they are willing to let their people literally starve. They've done that under previous organizations in order to save face, in order to maintain whatever it is that they want to do in order to keep moving their interests forward. And so it's quite you need to know a lot of things in order to be able to untangle this and move it forward. And you need a lot of different moving parts working together cohesively. And especially you need a government that's not working against the interests of the public, which we have had for decades. So it's about time we see this turn around. It's not going to be easy, but I think it needs to happen.
Any thoughts, Doug?
No, nothing more to add from what everybody else has already said anyway.
Yeah, it just kind of makes me think about the whole, like, it is crazy, like you said, Ryan, for how long we took this stance that was like, okay, we're going to help China. We're going to give them a leg up, and we're going to like usher them into the global market. And since I'll get into some of the rare earth mineral stuff in a while, but for decades, China has done all the things that we know that they've done. We've talked about this so many times on this channel, that they're like, have taken advantage of every opportunity they can to spy on the United States and other countries, to steal their intellectual property, to subsidize their goods and their exports in China via the government in order to drive and to undercut competition globally, so that they come out on top as being now the only people that are able to produce some of these things, including the rare earth minerals, which we'll get into, and things like that. And now the way that they're using their global status and kind of throwing around their weight, it really does start to feel like it's kind of China versus the rest of the world, and especially China versus the United States, because they want to take the United States position as like the top dog hierarchy situation, and the global leader essentially. But it is crazy because it's like it has taken so long. It's been like the elephant in the room, that's taken so long before we finally like recognized, yeah, we're kind of at war. And I know it's become just a trade war for the moment, but I know a lot of people have described it. It's like, well, we're already kind of at war in every terms, except we're actually shooting at each other. And it's right. And as crazy as that is, and as dramatic as that might sound, so it is something very serious. It's like we have to have a very clear, concise, goal and what we're trying to do, going forward with China, because we can't just play it the way that we've played it before. Because China has their goals, and they have the way that they do things, and they've been able to get away with it for such a long time that it's now the cracks are starting to show that they have control over the global markets in a way that's really is dangerous, I think, for everybody. But
I think I agree. China's control over the global markets is very dangerous. But I've also, in my research this week, come across another danger, in that, if I could use the illustration of somebody trying to, I talked about us trying to dig ourselves out of a hole, right? Well, what if you filled the hole with water so you could float to the top and get out, and accidentally drowned yourself while you were trying to float to the top, like while trying to escape from the hole? Like, I think there's also an opportunity for that to happen right now as well, with some of the things that the United States government is doing to try to get out of this hole with China. So I think there's a serious concern with us almost, in a sense, quote unquote, becoming like China and doing some of the things that we as a nation, especially conservatives here in the United States, have. Even Trump has criticized about China over the years and over the last several decades. So I want to get into that later too, because I think that's going to be critical in this discussion.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to jump into the rare earth minerals because that's like the center of the discussion. I'm sure we're going to branch off from there. Before I do that, let us hear a message from today's sponsor.
Investing can be confusing and scary, but it doesn't have to be. Genesis Gold Group takes the guessing out of the game and guides you on your gold investment journey. We at Filibusted love the genius design of the Prepper Bar, which breaks up into sections, kind of like a chocolate bar. But if you prefer high security insured gold storage, they have that too. And unlike Fort Knox, the gold is actually there, 100% owned by you. So don't wait to get started. Visit filibustedgold.com today for a free investment guide from Genesis Gold Group.
Okay, thank you, Genesis Gold Group, for sponsoring today's video. So getting to the rare earth minerals, this is just quick background here. And I'm getting to what China has been doing. I say secretly. It's pretty much out in the open now, but initially they started it secretly, and it was like, are they doing this on purpose? So there are 17 metals that are referred to as rare earth elements, REEs. REEs is the acronym, and these are deemed essential for all modern tech. So think consumer electronics and all the way up to national defense. Anything that beeps and boops, you got to have one of these 17 metals to make it work. And this is absolutely insane to me. I knew it was bad, but I honestly didn't know it was this bad. So China has a global monopoly, a literal monopoly on rare earth elements, both the mining and the refining of them. So they control 70% of all rare earth mining in the world. 70% of it is in China. And they also do 90% of the refining. So essentially, if you want a rare earth mineral, which everybody does, a rare earth element, everybody does, you have to go through China, either just to mine it or to refine it, because there's almost no country that is doing refining of these things, and China is doing 90% of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and just for a little example there, United States, we closed our last rare earth mineral mine back in 2002. And China has not stopped since the 80s. They have just gone full force, and they've now have a monopoly on this. And I'm sure Ryan could probably tell us some of the reasons why they've been allowed to take over as a monopoly, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But right now, China is using these rare earth minerals, I would say, as a bargaining chip in this trade war. So this July was the end of that 3-month. July and beginning of August, that 3-month extension that got extended again in August, right? So in July, they were exporting, it was a 6-month high of exports of these REEs. China was. So they're exporting tons of these REEs, 6-month high. And then starting in August, they began to scale back a little bit. They cut their exports by 3.4%. So a small cut in August, but that was nothing compared to September. At the end of September, looking back, they cut an additional 31% of their exports. So since this last 3-month extension, where we're like, okay, we'll give you another 3 months before we have to cut a trade deal, they have cut their exports by a full third. And remember, they are literally the supplier of REEs to the world. So this is a huge deal. It's going to drive up the cost of REEs. It's going to hurt anybody's ability to make electronics. It's a massive deal. So I think that it's intentional. I don't think they just randomly decided to do that. I believe they're throwing their weight around, kind of saying, don't forget, you need these REEs. You're dependent on us for this. And my thought is it's a bargaining chip to try to get a better trade deal with the US, maybe. What do you guys think about this with the minerals?
Well, it's definitely a bargaining chip. And I saw a comment this week where someone was like, the US cancels, sending chips to China, and everybody thinks that's normal. And then the China cancels sending rare earth minerals to the US, and everybody freaks out. So I think it is a back and forth that's been happening. And they have, timelines where you can see the United States hits China with this, and then China hits the United States back. And then it's like back and forth. The timeline is always, it's always like this game of it's like a sparring match, like one person will land a punch and then the other person will land a punch back and forth. So it's like they want the chips. The interesting thing that I've seen though is that China doubled down on manufacturing their own chips after that. Like they were like, okay, immediately, when Trump restricted the latest technology, China was like, all right, well, we're going to start making sure that we can build our own stuff here, and like that was their solution. And they're still working on that now. But I think that needs to be the solution on our end as well.
Yeah, I think we need to continue this. We call it decoupling. I mean, we're going to see an article, I think, from the U.S. talking about how China is not a reliable trading partner in this regard. And I think they've demonstrated that very clearly. They have what are called non-market trade policies, which means that the government intervenes heavily. Like it's not supply and demand and market pricing and production and trade, and they distort basically normal market competition and give unfair advantages and all kinds of things like that. And they do that in every atmosphere. I mean, I worked with Chinese companies, and I had learned a little bit about how they do some of those kinds of things and how they undercut competition and how they win global contracts and all kinds of things by subsidizing and all that sort of stuff. And there are times where that makes sense, but what we're seeing here is they're doing it to literally undercut competition and shut down any new competition that happens, and so that they can maintain the monopoly and continue to grow the monopoly. So why why North Korea can exist the way it does is because China supports North Korea. And why China supports North Korea? They have potentially the largest deposit of rare earth elements in the world. So North Korea. That is why China supports North Korea, and why and North Korea can exist the way it does today because of China. And why is China wanting to expand in Africa? China's the biggest exporter from Africa or importer from Africa of rare earth elements. And so a lot of that largely remains untapped. And so there's a lot of that. I mean, that's kind of like where we need to be looking and what we need to be doing. And that's, part of what Trump was talking about too, with Ukraine and different agreements and these sorts of things. And so we're very late to the game, but it's not too late. But if we don't address this now and swiftly and decisively, it will be game over. And so, we definitely need to be taking these positions. We need to be taking, this is absolutely about trade. It's about power. Trump, I have some other comments, on Trump's comments on this, and kind of maybe giving China an out so that they can save face while going back to maybe playing nicely. But so this definitely needs to be resolved. There's a lot of things at stake here.
To kind of give an example of that, we're producing electric vehicles here in the States, like Tesla, obviously being one of the largest producers at the moment. And, obviously people look at a Tesla and go, oh, that's pretty advanced, and there's another crowd that looks at a Tesla and sees a scratching post. But then China can do even better EV vehicles for a lot cheaper. And the reason is because they've stolen the IPs from the United States, and then the government is subsidizing it as well. So if those EVs were brought here to the States, maybe they have some problems. Maybe they're not as efficient. I mean, not efficient. Maybe they would fall apart. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't. And they are able to produce them so much cheaper than what we're doing now. So that's just an example of how they could really disrupt a growing market here in the U.S. But the problem is, it's because of the practices of the government that are deemed illegal almost everywhere else in the world, but that we've allowed China to get away with because the government says it's okay, and that's the way they operate or whatever. So,
to give you kind of like an idea of why stealing technology leads to a cheaper product. If you think about, if I'm going to sell something for $100, and you might say, well, you only paid $10 for the materials that go into that. And so why are you selling it for $100? You're ripping us off. And I would say, well, we also spent $3 million with R&D and engineering and testing and all the development that we had to do. And so we're actually not even going to make money until year 4. So we have to sell it at $100, and we did our market analysis with all this pricing. So all that goes into it. There's a cost that needs to be recovered. Well, if China just steals that, then they go and sell it for $15, and that's it. Right. That's what they do. And so now they undercut you, and they look like they got this massive efficiencies, which this is what happened with AI and these chips and this stuff recently, where it got exposed. And so it's the same thing with all the telecoms materials. I mean, we could do another episode on the telecommunication equipment that is in the U.S. from China in critical aspects around military bases in the middle of nowhere, because no one else wants to give the support needed. But China says, hey, if you put our equipment in there, we'll actually send people to live there and be your on-site support and all these kinds of things. Well, that's because it's a national security issue for them, and they understand they're playing a different game. And so,
well, here's the thing, though. This is something I'm just going to bring it up now since we're talking about it. The U.S. government is going down that same path, unfortunately, to an extent, and it's looking that way. And people are starting to raise their eyebrows because, you know, for the longest time, China, the government decides which companies in China succeed and which don't, and it all depends on whether they're playing along to the government's tune or not, you know, and doing what the government wants them to do. And that typically has not been the case in the United States because we have a free market versus a controlled market. And, you know, we've criticized China for having a controlled market. And yet just now, recently, because of these, you know, national security concerns with not having the rare earth minerals and things like that, the U.S. government has started to buy equity in some of the largest companies here in the United States. And they've done it two different ways. They've done it through buying up large portions of the stock. They've also done it through taking grant, they like the funding that an act would normally give to, like, you know, say like when the vehicle industry was in the tubes, you know, a couple decades ago, and all this money was, you know, like thrown everywhere by the politicians, like, hey, we're gonna bail you out.
Yeah, bail out.
You know, yeah, they're taking the funding of the acts, and instead of giving it as grant money, they're offering it as, well, we're going to give you a loan, but we're going to take some of your equity in exchange for that. So they're doing those two different things, where they're either buying up the stocks or they're giving loans for equity. And so they're buying portions of these large companies, like Intel, for example, is one of them, and some of the rare earth mineral companies. And the problem with that is, it looks a lot like what China has been doing for a long time, you know, and it's like, so now people are starting to say, well, the thing that we have fought against for so long, are we doing that? You know, and it feels necessary to an extent because we're fighting a foe like China, who they are playing unfair. So it's like, well, if you're playing unfair, then we got to play by your rules. But what are we sacrificing? What's the cost that we're paying for that? Especially, you know, in the future, when you have a president, you know, or you have a Congress that wants to, you know, use it to their advantage or whatever. It's like, are we going down that same path, and are we losing the free market that we once had here in the States, all based on the interest of national security? And my thought is, and I'm not blaming Trump for this, but my thought is like, well, we've heard the same thing before when it came to 9/11, and we've heard the same thing before when it came to COVID. You know, these large looming threats. Well, that justifies taking away some of your freedoms over here. And that would be my thought, is like, wait a minute, should the government be doing this? You know, and obviously a lot of people would say, well, right now, because of the rare earth mineral crisis, we need the government to step in and do something. But is this the right move? I don't know. Because then, you know, if once they have their claws and their talons into companies, then the government does decide which companies survive and which companies don't. Yeah, which ones get the contracts and which ones don't. Which ones get we're going to overlook that, you know, and we're not going to overlook it over here, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm very concerned about that. It's blurring the lines between the free market and the controlled market.
I think a part of I'm going to throw this really fast, small little detail here. I think a part of I'm definitely concerned about that as well. And I've heard the libertarian argument and being like, like doing the war cry of like, guys, the American government right now is buying equity into, you know, companies. Like this, we can't be doing this, you know, like Trump is not laissez-faire, you know, market, as they say, or whatever. He's focused on national security. He's focused on, we got to beat China. And I'm of the mind of like, no, I really think we are in a place where we actually do need to beat China. I think that there really isn't going to be a long peaceful solution. I think it is we do have to decouple. We have to say we're not playing the market games that China's playing anymore. So we have to have our market, and we need to pull people away from China. Countries, we need to pull countries away from China and say, all right, we're going to have our market, and we're going to let China do its thing, not declaring war on China, but saying it's like they're trying to undercut us and do war with us in every regard as they can right now. So it's like, why are we trading with them? Why are we helping them? You know, it's going to be painful. I think we need to rip the Band-Aid off. But one quick thing I want to throw out there, and it's just a small thought, is just that we've had this weird thing of like international companies. I truly do think, as much as I am like a free market person to an extent, like I'm not like we shouldn't have a government or no regulation at all, but I'm pretty free market, minded. I do think that there should be, without a doubt, loyalty among businesses to the country that it's based in. So if you're a US based business, you should have loyalty to the United States over, instead of an international mindset that's like, well, I'm just out to make profits. And so whoever I'm going to sell my soul to the highest bidder, so to speak. And like at this point, I don't know if American companies, I think we should have a decoupling where eventually American companies are not doing any business with China, because when you do business with China, they use that as a means to steal American IPs and hurt America further and foremost. I don't agree with American government buying up businesses or buying equity in businesses. I don't think that's a good thing in the long run.
I think Trump,
a small amount of that maybe is acceptable, but that needs to be kept to a very bare minimum. But I am in favor of saying American companies have to actually be for America and not for like this international mindset that's like, well, if we're making profits from China or from this country, it doesn't matter. It's like, I think there does need to be loyalties based somewhere, but that's
just briefly, and I'll let you go, Ryan. I think Trump may be viewing the United States government, since it's his second term and he's kind of been in there for a while now, and obviously there was a break in between, but he's getting a little too comfortable. He might be seeing it as like he sees one of his own companies, a little bit, where it's like, whatever means necessary, we're going to do the smart business move. And it's like, is it a smart business move? Absolutely. Is it a smart freedom move? Maybe not, like for future generations. I don't know.
Well,
what are your thoughts,
I think, I would say there's a lot to consider here, but I will say, like, it does make sense for the government to get involved financially in a free market, when private markets maybe won't fund a risky project, or maybe it's a long-term project and there's no capital funders that are interested in taking a risk. Like, that makes sense to me. What I'm finding hard to justify is a company taking equity and ownership, the government taking equity and ownership in a company. That's much different. Like, we see grants and all kinds of things that can be going out that have stipulations on them that have, like, okay, great, Trump's a good investor, we're going to do what's all great, but 20 years from now we have a different person in office with different persuasions, and they start doing things differently, and so I do think there is a place for the government to block and tackle, so to speak, on the global stage for this industry to jumpstart this industry, to get it going in the US. But there's a lot of intricacies there that we need to be considered and all that sort of stuff. But I think we're just kind of pretty unrealistic also about just kind of the reality, like with China, like decoupling. There was and even in Fortune 100 companies, I worked for a Fortune 100 company, global supply chain, all over the world. And you can't just flip a switch and buy a highly engineered custom product in a different place. In fact, but there were many companies were doing a decoupling strategy. They did it more privately. And what they would do is basically tool up another supplier that in case China said, we're shutting it down and you can't get your tools. And so, well, okay, turn on this other supplier in this other country. And so this is one of those cases where, maybe the government needs to be doing whatever they need to do to help other companies be able to decouple. Like, that could be another thing so that they can expedite this. And it's not just something that the company needs to take a risk for, And so I just think that there's a lot of nuances here, getting the government involved. Like China, they actually have a requirement for a Communist Party member, CCP member, to be on the board of every company. And if you want to open a company in China, you cannot just open a company in China. You have to do a joint venture with an existing company in China. And that would be a company that would then have a Communist Party member on the board that actually is subservient to the government of China, the Communist government of China. And what happens is, after that 2 or 3 year joint venture, that agreement expires, the company in China then says, we don't need you anymore. Thank you very much. But a joint venture is not the same as just a partnership. Partnership, you keep all your IP, you keep all that. Joint venture, it's a joint venture. You share everything. And so they already got all that. And so that's a large part of how they stole billions of dollars worth of IP and all those kinds of things. And so this is not a fair fight. This is not but we have leverage still that we need to be using. And if we don't use it soon, then it's going to be game over.
Right. You mentioned if the private companies are not willing to jump in there and actually, invest, then the government needs to step in. I think over the next, 7 to 10 years, we're going to see some private companies, especially rare earth mineral companies that are taking risks, get extremely wealthy, and some private individuals shift to the next Bill Gates potentially, like, the next whoever the guy that owns Amazon, whatever his name is, I forget.
Jeff
Bezos.
I can see his shiny turtle face in my mind, but
he's going to be trying to get the rare earth minerals from an asteroid or something.
I do think though you make a good point is that we've got good justification now. We're talking about all this now, like we're for it. Yeah, we've got a conservative president, we've got conservative House and Senate, and yeah, let's move forward with a lot of this stuff. But if we're not careful, it does just turn into a bait and switch. It could easily do that. Like you said, like after 9/11 and this Patriot Act, and now they can spy on everybody. Like, and now they got all these huge data centers and they got all this, and so this could very easily be the case. I know like in Iowa and Nebraska and the Midwest, North Dakota, we've talked about this CO2 pipeline where the government is literally allowing these private companies to say where they want to put this pipeline underground, that they're going to put liquefied CO2, which is insanity. And then they're using eminent domain, and this private company is benefiting from that, from using eminent domain, and they're stealing land from these farmers. And so
that's insane, Ryan. I get it. But in this case, it's like, we need private companies to step in.
So what I'm saying is, because this is a different situation where there is legitimacy here, it could very quickly turn to an illegitimate or a overplaying of the hand from the government side, is what I'm saying. Where then now that's what it is.
You got to tread carefully. I'm gonna move the conversation just a little bit because I think we've been on this for a little while. But I wanted to throw in before I expand on this. But yeah, REEs are not exactly rare according to Elon Musk. This is a good comment because it is rare earth elements. That's what they're called, but they're not exactly rare in the sense of like nobody has them. It's not that China happens to be sitting on the only place in the world that has REEs. They're actually all over the place. You can mine them in lots of different places in the world. And like I said, we used to have mines here in the United States. So I want to talk very briefly, just informationally, about why China does have the global monopoly on REEs before we get back into talking about this trade war situation. So China has prioritized mining and refining REEs since the 80s. Technically they've been doing it since like the 60s, but they really started prioritizing it heavily in the 80s, and they've gone full steam ahead, and they have not stopped. In the 90s, their president at the time said the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. So you can see where they're putting all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. The country does have massive rare earth element deposits. They really do. They have really, really big ones. But they're not the only place in the world that does. Obviously, we talked about Africa, and we even have some here in the United States. But more important than the size of their mines or the size of their deposits is the strength of the political will that they have there to mine and refine them. So I'll get into that briefly here. So since the 80s, they have basically been trying to drive all competition out of business, and they've done that because they've done it by having lower prices than everybody else. They have lower prices, so everybody buys from them. So eventually everybody else just goes out of business. Well, how do they have lower prices? First off, we know this already. The CCP has been subsidizing the industry heavily. So the tax dollars are going to subsidize their industry so they can do it cheaper, so they can the businesses can do it cheaper, so they can sell the minerals cheaper. And that's intentional. Because they want to be the only people in the world that are doing this. And then number two, which I'll just throw this comment up on the screen that says we shackle ourselves with morals, China does not. The other reason is a myriad of reasons that are basically they have way lower environmental standards than we do. They don't have environmental standards in China. We've talked about this before with the fake like green energy agenda that's occurred in the world, where essentially it's made the West be like, yeah, we want to have clean energy. And then we've pushed all our clean energy agenda has pushed where we now have China doing all the dirty work for us.
Clean hands, dirty imports. That's what we can say.
It's like our hands are clean, but China does everything. China is the biggest polluter in the world, but we buy our stuff from China, and then we use clean stuff like solar power and stuff like that.
And then we sell our recycling to China, and they promise us that they're going to recycle it, and then we can check that box. We're green.
Exactly. But it's a game. The whole thing's a game. It's nothing is green about it. This isn't, I'm not going to get on a soapbox here, but there's nothing green about solar and wind in the way that we're currently doing it. There's absolutely nothing green about it. Honestly, fossil fuels are still, because of how efficient they are still actually cleaner and safer and better than solar and wind. But nuclear power, of course, beats that out. So hopefully we'll go towards nuclear power in the future, but that's my opinion. But yeah, compare that to the United States. So we have closed our last REE mine in 2002. And that's essentially because of environmental lobbying, because we wanted to push, we want to be more green. So it's allowed China to get the upper hand because they are actually allowed to do things and mine and refine things. And we're not allowed to do that in the States, and nobody really wants to do it in the West. And so we have gone green and lost our ability to make anything and push that off to China, who's not afraid to get dirty. So that's kind of what has occurred. I don't know.
I would say this. Yeah, one thing Trump should be in charge of because so we've got like you said, he shut down these mines. So okay, but then let's say we all of a sudden open up all these mines. We don't have the infrastructure for domestic refining and processing of all these rare minerals. So that's what I think Trump can do next is go ahead and take over the management of those things, like we've talked about in other episodes, and actually get that infrastructure put up and running ASAP. Like that's what should be happening. And then, okay, bring them in. Okay, fine. And I don't really care. I mean, we can talk about whether the government should own that refinery or whether a private company should own that refinery. Like I need to do more research to know what I really think about that. But the fact is we need the refineries. Like it needs to happen. And so that's kind of like the same thing. And to give people an idea of how price controls move the market, let's say I've got a bakery and I'm selling the best bread in the world, and I'm selling it for $10 a loaf. And then now someone else comes in and they're starting to sell it at $10 a loaf. And I say, well, I don't want that person to come in and sell this. So I start selling mine for $2 a loaf. And now nobody goes and buys that bread. Well, that bakery, I can take the losses for a year because I've been doing it for many years. Now that bakery can't take those losses. They're going to go out of business. Okay, well, then I put my price back to $10. And so that I would never do that. I don't have a bakery. I would own one. But that is how that works. That's exactly what happens. That's what China does, and why we have a monopoly that continues.
Yeah, and because of the national security issue, Trump recently said tariffs are a very important tool for our defense, for our national security. That's what he's trying to do, and it's because China has monopolized and pushed everybody else out of the business, and then now they control a very important element to building the things we need. Modern day warfare requires the rare earth minerals that we're talking about. And so we're going to go back to not the Stone Age, but, we're going to be pushed backwards in time if we don't have access to those, so that's what he's talking about there is if all of a sudden they completely shut us off, they have control over whether we can defend ourselves or not as a nation in today's world, in the world we live in, so it's like they have a long-term strategy, whether they're going to use it or not for nefarious purposes. They have a long-term strategy to beating the United States in a war like that if we don't fix the situation we're in. That's the problem. Not, and we are, we do have a stockpile now. We are stockpiling rare earth minerals, but it took us a long time to get around to that. And, people used to stockpile oil, and obviously we still do. All the nations stockpile oil, but now nations are starting to wake up and realize we have to stockpile these rare earth minerals. We have to have, like you said, Ryan, we have to have that cushion, to where we can take a hit, if they get restricted, obviously there's certain limitations to that, like how much we can stockpile, how fast and everything. But also, the stockpile we have in the United States, what they're doing, it's literally for defense. Like that's the reason. And so it cannot be touched unless the president says, go, start using the stockpile, or a high official in the Defense Department. Like it is literally for defense purposes. That is what the stockpile is for. And so it's like that they're recognizing the potentially severe issue that could occur, if China pulled the plug.
Doug, you had any thoughts, Doug? I just realized I haven't heard from you in a while. I want to make sure you have the floor here.
Oh, I appreciate that. I was just going to say there are a couple extra things here. I do think that number one, Trump wouldn't try to hit at China so hard if he didn't have a plan, like a real one that was already in play. And one of those is Australia. Australia apparently is a mining country in essence. But the problem becomes, like what you were saying, Ryan, was the refining of the minerals too. Like Australia sends, I got this pulled up here, 90% of their lithium goes to China for processing. But there is evidence that there's been hundreds of millions of dollars requested for refineries here in America. So it is possible that we are in the background setting up a whole process of maybe importing from Australia to refine here in the States to then use for our own purposes. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was where we're heading. I think that Trump has that kind of a plan in mind. If not that exactly, then it would be something similar to that.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're right, Doug, that he has a plan. Reese, are you going to talk about JP Morgan?
No, I was going to talk about soybean purchases, but before we jump into, I do want you to talk about that. Before we jump into that, I just one quick notice. I just want to say, I know this all sounds a little bleak. I'm a little optimistic when I think about the what recently happened. I know we've talked about this before with the Congo, where we have a whole episode on the Congo and their rare earth minerals and the situation with the kind of militant group that took over the east side of Congo, backed by Rwanda and all that kind of stuff, that was stealing their minerals. Because I know, people can go look up the Belt and Road Initiative of China, but China's invested so much money into Africa through their Belt and Road Initiative. But what we saw with Congo was when Congo was in trouble, they reached out to the United States. They reached out to Trump to try to cut a deal and be like, hey, will you help us with this militant group taking over the east side of our country? And in exchange, we want to do business with you and we want to sell you more minerals. Well, they already had, supply lines set up with China. But the problem is the African countries are becoming wise to the fact that through the Belt and Road Initiative that China's been doing, the investments they do in their countries, that, excuse my language, but China's screwing them over and is cheating them at every place that they can, over promising, under delivering, and basically enslaving the nations with debt traps. That's what they're
debt traps, and sending their own people to do the work there, employing their own people in Africa, in China. Not employing the Africans.
Right. Yeah. And so it's in every way it benefits China, and at the end does not actually benefit the African countries at all. And that's one of those things that's it actually, when we talk about what's the difference between, thank you for pulling that up, the Congo video. It's a great video. It makes you think of what's the difference here? We have the United States versus China. Is it really two global powers at war with each other? And I truly think it is two global powers at war with each other. I do think the only way forward is a slow decoupling, because we don't want to be giving China the upper hand anymore. We need to be able to decouple, but it's going to be a massive Band-Aid pull. And we've already seen, after you're done with your part, Troy, I want to talk about the downsides, because we're seeing downsides left and right. We're seeing the pain from trying to decouple from China and the trade war, and how it's hurting U.S. farmers, how it's, it's hurting consumers, it's hurting people. It is going to be painful. It's not going to be pleasant, but I think that people need to understand what's at stake here, because you have the way that China does things, and not that the United States is perfect, but I think that was prime example that Congo could have asked anybody for help, but they asked the United States for help. And that is as an American, that gives me some hope and some pride of we're not perfect, but maybe we're doing things at least marginally better than the way that China does things, that maybe we could get the rest of the world on our side and say hey, we want to have a free and fair way of doing business. Do business with us, and please decouple from China, because it's just not worth it. You're making a deal with the devil.
And I want to say another thing word you should, whenever you hear the word decouple, what you should really think is de-risk. That's really what the point of decoupling is you're removing risk from a supply chain, or risk from all these other aspects that we've been talking about. And that's what the Treasury Secretary, or the Bassett said about this, is that the world doesn't want to decouple, but they need to de-risk. And so if this is the way they're going to act, then this is what we need to be doing.
Troy, you want to go ahead and jump into that JP Morgan thing you're talking about? Because I don't know what that is.
We're talking about what's the solution, right? I think this is the critical thing that the United States needs to figure out, which is not just mining, but also processing of these rare earth minerals here in the States. Which we said earlier, they're not rare in the sense of they're nowhere. We have deposits here in the States. Canada has deposits. They're all over the place. Some places they're more, readily available than others. But this is what I'm talking about when I say there are private companies that are going to make, trillions of dollars potentially in the long run. So JP Morgan, this just came out on Monday. They target critical minerals with a 1.5 trillion security initiative. Okay, that sounds like an insane amount of money, but this company has $4.6 trillion in assets and $357 billion in stockholder equity. So they've got the money to essentially save the United States, I would say. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like that's overstating it. So Monday they launched a security and resiliency initiative committing over 1.5 trillion over the next 10 years to strengthen U.S. supply chains. And the CEO, Jamie Dimon, emphasized in his article, emphasized critical minerals essential for national security. So they're recognizing this trilateral, if that's the right word, intersection of events happening where the government is saying, we want to help this happen. China's putting the pressure and restricting, and the United States is going, oh no, we're not in a good spot. What do we do? And they're saying, hey, we can make a lot of money over the next 10 years if we get right in the middle of this, right? Somebody's got to do it, So their plan is their plan of execution.
Somebody's got to make the millions left. We might as well be us.
Somebody's got to make all this money. Yeah, we will.
While
you're serving your country in the meantime, serving the needs of your national defense.
100% risk free, but yeah,
no, it's not. It's not. They're taking a risk, but so here's their plan. They want to hire field experts, form an advisory council with industry leaders, and then they're going to advocate for streamlined permitting. So that's the real hurdle they have to jump is they're hoping for reduced regulations and reduced red tape, which has been the major obstacle hindering new mining projects in the U.S. And you said earlier, 2002 was the last mine was closed. Right? And there's one they're working on opening one right now. But it's almost like the government has set us up to fail for such a long time that they're recognizing a critical moment where they know the government's going to take its restrictions off. And they're going to be able to jump in first, and they're going to. I think they're going to win big. And I think
the right administration for if anybody is willing to try to deregulate and say let's
Trump is going to
mine baby mine or whatever
he already did.
Do it. Now's the time because Trump's in power, and I don't think I'm overstating it when I said they could save the United States. Like
I think he already did. I don't
like JP Morgan. I'm like, heck yes, let's do it. So anyways,
I'm waiting. Go ahead, Doug.
There's an executive order that he put out in March where he waived where he waived a bunch of regulations that would help set this up. So I think I honestly think this has all been kind of done in the background. It's just the trigger hasn't been pulled yet, And so there's a lot of things happening. And if you really look at the nitty gritty details of it, it paints the picture quite well. And so I think that we do have this plan in place, and it's going to be things like this that are going to make it happen for us. And I think China's kind of screwed in a sense because I don't think they're going to be able to keep up as soon as this is launched. And it's just a matter of time.
Still got to build those refineries, though. As Ryan said, you can't build a refinery and start using it overnight. So that's.
But I will say this: as long as the government of California is not the ones managing the building of the refinery, we should be able to do it relatively quickly.
You might be able to with the hundreds of millions of dollars that they're trying to put towards it.
Trump has managed these huge projects that he did in a way, and I'm not saying Trump's the answer, but there's a way. I've managed multi-million-dollar international projects. There's a way to do it well, and there's a way to not do it well. And these,
Did
building
you do
these
it
things
well or not, Ryan? That's the question.
Always well. I had great mentors and coaches and guardrails, of course. But this is something that. It needs to be, and not actually what I was gonna say is this is what happens when we see all of the people involved and the interests involved actually doing what is best in the best interest of the American people, we the people. And so it can happen very quickly. And when we don't have people in leadership, now I'm not saying everybody's perfect and there may be all kinds of things hidden in here that I don't like, but things can move very quickly and it can go very efficiently and effectively when we actually move forward the interests that we want to represent. And so, not
there's a lot of there's a lot of negative pushback right now from the media and the news. I think Fox Business is one of the only positive responses to everything that's happening that I've seen. One of their headlines read, China's tariff threats backfire as U.S. businesses give unexpected response. Obviously they're referencing things like JP Morgan's initiative, and so I think there is hope for America. I think there is hope for this, us getting out of this hole. But like you said, Ryan, I think it's going to take people working together who, traditionally, the media and unfortunately the left and unfortunately some people on the right have tried to get us to not work together, and to fight each other. And I think we need to be more united as the United States of America than we've ever been before, to help each other, build that human ladder essentially and get out of this hole.
Yeah. Troy or Doug, I want to know, for educational purposes only, if somebody was interested in blockchain and cryptos related to this stuff, where would they put their money?
Where would they put their money?
Yeah.
They would be best to do their own research.
Oh, there you go. Okay. I should have known.
I'm glad you brought up
a friend.
Yeah. Here's the one thing I will say. Try to find
Doug.
something that actually has value. And what you think after doing the research for what you believe is real value, that's what you should be investing in. And so, like, don't ever invest anything into anything that you're not actually confident in yourself from what you've already learned. So there's too much of this thing going around where people are saying like, oh, invest in this and invest in that, and it's a big emotional thing. And so people just take somebody else's word for it. Don't take anybody else's word for it. Do your own research. You can start with all the top ones. Yeah, just start with the top coins and work your way from there. It's not. I know that there's tons of those out there, but it's not that difficult to just start with the top, work your way through, figure out which ones you believe in the most. Because if you don't believe in it, you're going to make a mistake.
That's right. Thanks.
I'm glad you brought up crypto there. I didn't want to end on a negative note, but hopefully this won't be too negative. But I do want to talk about some of the backlash, not the media backlash. We know anything that Trump does, there's a certain portion of the media that will paint it in the worst possible light. And so there's definitely, I've read some articles that are just like, it's like you guys, your article is written in a way that's like, you don't understand what's at stake. You don't understand the risk that China is. You're just kind of taking this as a chance to be like, oh, Trump made the markets dip down the other day because he threatened China with tariffs. But there is legitimacy in the fact that, yes, this is a rough process. There are side effects. There are consequences to this. And there is, like I said, the ripping off of that Band-Aid. If this is the beginning of the decoupling, or if this is the beginning of a long trade war, it's going to be rough. And there's some rough stuff that's already happened. So a lot of people know about this, but we had a dip in the market last week. I guess on Friday after Trump, because of China continuing the ban on their exports, reducing their exports so much on those rare earth minerals, Trump threatened to slap 100% tariff on them starting on November 1st. So that's ahead of the deadline. And that caused maybe, or it was related to the suddenly on Friday, one of the biggest crypto crashes that's ever happened, like a 20% loss. I'm sure Doug bought at the bottom of that dip.
I'm watching Troy's face because he covered this the other day, and there is a whole different aspect of it. So I just keep looking at him. That's why
I did, Troy. If you feel free to pull up that episode, I know I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I know Troy did a whole outline on that just the other day. So if you want to learn about the real reasons behind that, go look at Troy's episode from earlier this week about.
I will say,
crash.
Since you mentioned it, I will say that yes, it absolutely started the ball rolling, but there was a what I would call a heist happening behind the scenes, and they took that as the perfect opportunity to play out their plan. So there was another reason why it dropped so low so fast, and that's in that other episode.
Yeah, so go check that one out from earlier this week if you want to learn about that crypto crash. But besides the markets, the stock market or the crypto market, I just want to throw this one out. This is a huge one. So soybean purchases. I did not know this. I'm not like super into U.S. agriculture. I don't know everything that's going on in that realm. I'm not very exposed to it. But apparently, China has been the biggest purchaser of U.S. soybeans for. There's the episode. Friday's crypto crash was a planned event. Go check that one out. So China has been the largest purchaser of American soybeans for the longest time. It's billions of dollars in soybean purchases a year. Billions and billions of dollars.
It's weird to me because isn't that like where soy comes from? Am I mistaken?
From China, I have no idea. But we grow it here in the United States.
Beans. It's the beans and grain, and they need it to feed their hogs and to feed the animals there, and then that feeds the people. So if they don't have those ag imports, they can't feed their animals, and then they can't feed their people.
So, but as of this year,
anyway.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for that explanation, Ryan. So the autumn harvest started last month in September, and so far China hasn't bought any soybeans from the United States, and they usually buy billions of dollars.
Enter Brazil.
Enter Brazil. So here comes Brazil in a second. But why did they stop
you already
buying them?
nice. You did your research.
Yeah. So why did they stop buying them? So a few reasons here. One, as I mentioned earlier, China now has tariffs on the United States, some that they haven't had before. And so they have a 34% tariff on the U.S. beans. And so one explanation is that it has just made China's own tariff on our beans has made it too expensive for Chinese importers to purchase U.S. beans now. So their own tariffs have done this, right? And so it's made the U.S. beans more expensive. But of course, the other reason, of course, is just that we're in a trade war, and them not buying our beans is a way to hurt the U.S. and it may be another bargaining chip, right? And so, yeah, enter Brazil. So right now they're buying all of their beans from South America, most of them coming from Brazil. And that actually started to ramp up. This is a little mirror, and we could see this before from Trump's first term. In Trump's first term, this happened. Trump was in a much smaller trade war with China, but a little bit of a trade war. And that prompted China to stop buying our soybeans. And then they started buying them from Brazil as well. And because they made that contact with Brazil and those deals with Brazil, even after the trade war ended in 2020 and that we cut an agreement with China again, the America's soybeans have never come back to the same levels of being able to sell them to China because now they have Brazil selling to China as well. And so they haven't been able to get back to that same level of like selling these billions of dollars to China they're used to. And so just so you guys know, Trump has already promised bailouts for U.S. soybean farmers. He's already promised bailouts. And this is exactly what he did in his first term. In his first term, that little tariff trade war thing, it kicked off an estimated $27 billion loss for American farmers. And 9.7 of those $1 billion was a loss for soybean farmers. And Trump's administration gave a $23 billion, so almost covered it, a $23 billion bailout for American farmers. So he did that his first term. And I honestly didn't even know that happened. So he's already saying right now that he's going to use the money we've made from tariffs. He's like, well, we've made so much money from tariffs. And he says, I know it's hurting the farmers right now because China is doing this as a negotiation chip. That's what he said. He said the only reason the soybean farmers in our country are being hurt because China is for negotiating reasons only, not buying. We made so much money on tariffs that we're going to take a small portion of that money and help our farmers. So he's doing a mirror of what he did the first term, and he's going to, I guess, plan on bailing out the farmers because they are losing, especially these farmers are losing.
Can we just find something different other than soy? Because that garbage is poison. We need to completely shift our mindset over. Let's just abandon the whole thing and restart. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I know that.
So
I put a comment. Now I'm hungry for tofu in the chat.
Oh man. So I just want to say,
gross.
That's funny.
Accurate.
So Brazil has traditionally been very close with the U.S. and Lula, who is very close to China. He's the president of Brazil right now. They stole the election from Bolsonaro. They want to push away from the U.S. and they want to be closer to China. And that's a pretty big gamble because if China starts to go down, that's a problem. And so we pray that they will turn around. But I will say this, you hear the word bailout and you hear the word the agri industry or soybeans or whatever is associated with that. And if anybody starts to try to compare that to bailing out the banks, you need to tell them immediately there's a big difference between a industry that is hurt because of political tensions and actions and an industry that corruptly created fake derivative markets and then knew that they were going to get bailed out and then went ahead and did it anyway and still made all the profits. Completely different situation. And then we can talk about the car manufacturers as well. It's also a different situation. I'm not 100% for that. I'm not sure that should have happened. But anyway, what I'm saying is it's not all things equal.
Cars sitting in parking lots and sitting in old airport lots.
So there's things where you don't have natural market conditions moving things around. Then you end up with problems that you shouldn't have. And so
the government coming in and the government buying up cornfields and burning the corn.
Yeah. Right. So
there's a lot of problems in the world.
Right? I want to throw that out there because
we're solving them all here for you.
I'm not a big fan of some of the current agricultural stuff and like soy. I don't think is the healthiest thing for you to be eating. But I am a big fan of us being able to have profitable farms in the United States and a big fan of our homegrown farmers here that are just making a living off of selling soybeans to China. I get that. And yeah, it just stinks because they can't control. That's not their fault. They can't control the next political move that's going to happen where all of a sudden, for negotiating purposes, China's not going to buy from them anymore. They already grew it. They put the money, they have the loans that they had to get at the beginning of their growing season to buy the fertilizer and the seeds and the equipment, all these things. They're in the hole, and they had to sell all these beans in order to
it's not
make
just
a profit.
soy farmers. It's all over the place. It's not just the soy farmers. It's all over the place in the farming industry in the United States. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of them are in massive debt, and they're just trying to get out of a hole.
Right.
So we have. I mean, this is a whole nother can of worms. But we have a whole industry that is critical and essential, like not a fun industry, a critical, essential industry that's going down the tubes right now. And, we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot in that way as well. We can find bad things to talk about all day long. I just realized if we
Well, I was saying we should do a agriculture episode at some point, because we could get into like regenerative farming and things like that with the whole current Maha movement. That'd be really interesting. But I did just want to throw that out there. Trump, of course, has already, as you said earlier, Troy, tit for tat retaliation. Trump has already threatened to stop buying cooking oil from China since they stopped buying soybeans from us. I didn't realize we were buying cooking oil from China. He was like,
you should buy zero cooking oil.
Say what?
We don't need the cooking oil.
You should buy zero cooking oil.
Back to since we're a little bit of health nuts, my mind was like, oh well, great, let's stop buying cooking oil.
No more healthy again.
Let's just do tallow or butter, avocado oil, coconut oil, something.
There you go.
Besides whatever we're buying from China. But yeah, anyway, so already tit for tat retaliation there. Just as you can see, it's just going to continue. We're out of the hour mark. So any closing remarks for you guys? I just wanted to throw out some of what Americans are already currently suffering through. Maybe that bailout will come through and bail out the farmers, hopefully, so that they don't go out of business. That would be devastating. It happened the first term. Trump bailed them out the first term. So I'm sure he's going to do something and try to bail them out again. But what do you guys think? Closing thoughts on this whole fiasco before we get done with this?
My final thoughts is just I'm glad to see that we're finally moving forward with these very critical areas. We saw under the Biden administration, we saw some kind of pretend actions go forward, but it's nice to see these actually moving forward. It needs to be accelerated. There's a lot to stay on top of here. There's a right way to do this, and we need to kind of future-proof it as well for future administrations. But right now is the time to strike, and we just need to make sure we keep putting pressure on our elected officials to do the right thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. Well, to close it off, I saw this on from the Pirate Wires newsletter the other day, but they said this whole thing, we can go a few years without a new iPhone, talking about basically when you rip off the Band-Aid, like what's going to happen here when we rip off the Band-Aid and decouple. It's going to be difficult to make things. It's going to be difficult to buy things for a little while. But he said we can go a few years without a new iPhone, but we won't survive dependence on the CCP. And I 100% believe in that. I think that it is worth.
I agree. And what happened during World War II when there were metal shortages, all the metal went to making the stuff that they needed. The rubber shortages is all went to making the defense, stuff. Like that's what it went to. And that's what needs to happen now is we need to recognize, we don't need a new iPhone. I mean, we can literally go back to flip phones or whatever it is that uses less of it, or just keep the phone that we have for a few extra years or whatever.
Which apparently they don't know what they're doing anyway with the new iPhone that they release. So.
Oh, exactly. But the point being, the things that are the most essential are the things that the government's going to say, we're still going to use it for this, but you don't have it for this industry and this one and this one. Those are the things that are going to go first. And I think, again, for the companies out there that are like looking to make a ton of money, there's people that are going to stand in the gap and say, well, here's another option. Have y'all thought about this? And then it's a huge opportunity if people are willing to look at it. I don't own any of those companies and I don't have any friends like that. So unfortunately, I'm not going to make any money off of it.
Maybe we could start. So we can start an American, manufacturing.
Here's your iPhone replacement.
Filibusted investment fund.
Yeah. Well, great conversation, guys. Thank you to the live chat, everybody that's joined in. Let us know your comments below, and we will see you guys next time.
Gold is not just a backup plan if the world falls apart. It's an investment opportunity that could set you up for generations. There's never really a bad time to invest in gold, but you want to make sure you have the right guide, and that is where Genesis Gold Group shines. Whether you are a first-time buyer or a seasoned investor, Their trusted expertise and competitive pricing makes them an easy choice. They offer tangible assets in case of emergencies, but they can also design the perfect IRA just for you. And they'll even cut through all that confusing red tape from the IRS. We at Filibusted love the genius design of the Prepper Bar, which breaks up into sections like a chocolate bar. But if you prefer a more high security insured gold storage, they have that too. And unlike Fort Knox, the gold is actually there and 100% owned by you. Genesis Gold Group is a safe, simple, and convenient way to invest. Visit filibustedgold.com today for your free investment guide from Genesis Gold Group.